Hi, everyone. So, in the last lecture, we discussed recursive algorithms, and recursive algorithms really shine when it comes to recursive data structures. So just like we defined an algorithm in terms of itself, a function in terms of itself, the same notion applies to some particular data structures where we call them recursive because they are defined in terms of themselves. For example, if you have a nested list, so each element inside of that list is also a list, which means that the kind of operations that you can do on a list is the same kind of operations that you can do on the elements of that list. And if those lists also contain other lists, then it means that, okay, we can kind of see that there is a recursive pattern to that particular data structure. But because the list is just versatile, it can contain any kind of object, we prefer to design our own recursive data structures if that's what we need. So let's get started here. Okay. So, all right. So here, what I have is an example of such a nested list. This is the outer list, and inside of that, we have two other lists as well. Again, this, for example, the append method works on the outer list, and it also works for the inner list as well. So again, this object is defined in terms of itself. I don't know, you have maybe seen these kinds of Russian dolls where each doll contains another doll, that contains another doll, that contains another doll, which is an example of a kind of a recursive container. So, okay, if I want to put some money inside of the innermost doll and you're holding in your hand the biggest doll, then one implication is that you have to open up that big doll and then go open the next one and the next one and the next one until we reach the innermost doll and then put your money there and then close everything back up again. So there's this notion of again, recursive operations that you need to do in order to get down to the bottom of that particular container, down to the very last element. Okay. Okay, so there's a difference between a situation when I want to add some money or any kind of other object to the innermost doll or to the outermost doll. For the outermost, I just open that up and then put some money in there. For example, we'd use it as a piggy bank. Or for the innermost one, I have to go step by step, open up all of the dolls in order to access that very last item. Okay. So here's an implementation of a data structure that looks a lot like what we just have seen here with these Russian dolls. And I call it a treasure box. Let's see what this treasure box contains. So here you can see with when we initialize this object, we have this self.next and self.treasure. Self.treasure contains the data that we want to store. Okay, that's the content of that data structure. And self.next contains the reference to the next item or to the next treasure box, which is inside of that outer box. Okay. So initially it's set to none, the next. And when we create this object, we just give it some data, named treasure here, and then we set it to self.treasure. Okay. So one box contains some data, and then it also contains a reference to the next object or to the next treasure box. The important thing here is that what is the type of this self.next? It is also a treasure box. Okay, so here is the recursive structure that you can see. So the treasure box itself is a treasure box object, and then inside of it we have the data and also a reference to the next treasure box. So that next one is also a treasure box. That next one inside of that is also a treasure box. And again, the most important implication here is that all of the methods that are available to you for the outermost treasure box are also available to you for the inner treasure boxes. Okay. Any questions about this def_init function? And remember that there's no notion of something existing inside something else in the memory. So when I say that this contains another treasure box, it's just conceptual. Otherwise, things are just scattered all around the memory, and what we store is just an address of the next item or a reference to the next item. This is all just conceptual when I say this is inside of that other object. Okay, let's see what methods we have. So we have two methods here. Let me fold those. Yeah, three methods. Okay, append outer, append inner, and get. So this append outer is what I described with the Russian dolls. So if I want to add like an outermost treasure box, I can use this method, an innermost treasure box in this method, and then to get an item, I use this method. So let's see the implementation here. Append outer, okay. So it says new box equals treasure box, and it receives some kind of data, which is the treasure. And now what happens in this line, it says that take that new treasure box and then set its next attribute to self. This might be a little tricky at first. So again, when we want to create a new treasure box, okay, suppose that this is the box, and I want to create a larger box. What I have to do, okay, so this is the larger box, okay, and this larger box has a link to that inner box. And right now I'm here, so this is self, okay, and when I want to append something to the, from the outside, that thing has to contain a reference to self, and this is exactly what's happening here. So this outermost thing is a treasure box by itself. This inner thing is a treasure box by itself. And as you can see here, I create this object, and the most crucial thing to do after that is that I set its .next attribute to self, right? Okay, so, yeah. Always a new entity. Yeah, it could exist because you could have defined that data structure already, where each treasure box has an existing reference to the next treasure box and to the next treasure box. So yeah, in case that doesn't exist, which happens with the innermost and the outermost one, we have to set it equal to a reference to the other boxes. Yeah. Okay. So does this make sense, this part of this method? When we want to have a bigger box to put everything inside of that one, this is the method that we use. Create a new box, set its next attribute to self. Yes. Exactly. Right. So right, that's a good point. So here, this one had a .next attribute, this bigger one, which we set it to self. Self itself has another self.attribute, which in this case it's none, because there's nothing inside of that innermost item. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Now it gets more interesting with this other method here. Okay. So let's discuss this line first. Okay. Why do I need to return that new box? Right. So let's hear. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Both of you are correct. So because we're creating a bigger structure now, a bigger treasure box now, this is what's going to give us access to those inner boxes. So we have to return this thing, and this thing inside of itself has references to the pre-existing treasure boxes that we had. So when we create this bigger one, we have to return it in order to know what that object is, where that object is. Otherwise, we just lose it. Okay. All right. Whoa. Okay. So append inner. That one is a little bit different compared to the other one. So again, we take in some data, treasure, okay? And then let's see how we can append to the innermost object here, innermost treasure box. So first of all, we say that if self.next is none, okay, meaning that we are at the innermost treasure box, self.next is none. So just go ahead and set self.next to a new treasure box with that data. Okay, if we are here, this was none, okay, so just create a new treasure box here and set tv.self.next equal to that new object, to that new treasure box, okay. Otherwise, if that's not none, it means that we're somewhere in between or at the outermost treasure box. We're somewhere in between. There are other treasure boxes after that one. So in that case, we say that, okay, run this method, self.next dot append inner treasure. What is dot append inner? It's the same function. It's the same method. Append.inner, append.inner. Okay. Now this is defined recursively. And this is now what gives, what makes the code elegant in this case. So instead of running a for loop or a while loop or something like that with a complex code, keeping track of everything, you say that, okay, the kind of operations that I want to do on that outermost box is exactly the same as the kind of operations that are allowed to do on this one or on the other one inside that one. Everything is the same. Okay. So if you start here, okay, is this none? No. So move to the next object and do the same kind of algorithm again. So look at here. Is this none? Yes. So just append a treasure box here. Okay. So we say, okay, we have an algorithm, a set of instructions for us. Apply that set of instructions from that on that first element that you see, on that first object that you see. If it's none, append the object there. If it's not, go to the next and then read through the same set of instructions. Okay, so recursively go inside of that treasure box until you find the innermost element, and then there you hit the base case and then create a new treasure box there. Okay, and again, going back to that point that self.next is itself a treasure box, so it has this .append inner method. And inside of that one, again, the other treasure box is also treasure box object, so it still has this append inner method. This is why we can apply that recursively. Okay, so in this case, first of all, any questions about the process that we go through here? Yes? Yes, that's right. So in Python, if you want to implement that, and if you know that you're going to have more than like 3,000 elements, yes, that's not going to work. You have to increase the depth. But usually, you don't implement these kinds of objects inside of Python if you want to go beyond 3,000 elements. So that's why we don't really care about that situation in this case. Yeah. And OK. Any other questions? Yes. What is the? Okay. So if I understand the question correctly, so when we go into the else block, it says, okay, do the same kind of thing that you're doing on the inner box, right? So, okay, and then if that one is still has other items appended to it, go to the next one, go to the next one, until you reach the innermost one. And when you reach the innermost one, self.next is none, so you set that self.next to a new treasure box, and then you don't need to return anything from that, right? Yeah, so in this case, that's a great point. In this case, return self is actually not needed. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yes? It's just conceptual, just to make an analogy with the Russian halls. Yeah. Okay. Let's now check out this other method, get. So suppose that, okay, I want to get one of these boxes, get the data for that to see what's the treasure inside of that. And for that, okay, let's see. So it says, if we are at depth 0, meaning that if we are in the innermost box, then just return self.treasure. Otherwise, if, if we are at the outermost level, okay, then just return self.treasure. And self.treasure is the data inside of that. And if self.next is none, meaning that we are in the innermost level, okay, then just return none because there's nothing in there, okay. And otherwise, just return self.next gets depth -1, meaning that go back to the top, run the same function, the same get method on the next object. So again, this notion of recursively applying the same function again and again on the data in order to get items or in order to set data for the items that we have in the set of treasure boxes. Okay, so let me run a few examples here. So treasure box, I started with $5, for example, and then I append $100 to the outer end, and also again another $20 to the outermost end. Yeah, I forgot to run this. Okay, and let's see. So get 0, okay, $20. That's the outermost treasure box. Get 1 should give us 100. That's correct. And get 2 should give us the $5, the initial $5 that we started. So $5, $100, and another one with $20. Okay, so it works as expected. And if we run this, it just doesn't return anything because we don't have a depth 3 in there. We could also just throw an error. Okay. Now let's see how this this append inner works. So box that gets 0, this is the innermost one. Okay. Sorry, this is the outermost one. So let me just write that down. Outermost level. Okay. And then here we get box in initial box, and then get 2 box in the second box. So we start with this initial box, and then we append something here. That's the, so this is the 0 level, and that thing is this other treasure box. That's level 1, and then we have another level here. That's treasure box 2. Treasure box 2. Okay. Okay, so initial box, and then box inside of initial box inside of the second box. All right. So now let's take a look at this exercise and think about it for a minute. Without running the code, what will this return? So any guesses? B, right, yeah. So let's work through that to see why that happens. So we start with A here, which is a treasure box. Okay, we just have the data, that's A. Okay, we append inner. All right, this means that I create another box here, B. Okay, then I append outer, which means that I do something like this, C. Okay. Then I again append outer here, and that one is D. Okay. And finally, I do append inner, which is the innermost box here. All right, like that. And get 3 is, we start from 0, 0, 1, 2, and 3. So this one should return B, and it returns B. Okay. So if you happen to to have done your undergrad degree in computer science, you know that this structure is called a linked list. So when you check out algorithm practice questions, you probably see this name, linked list practices, for example. And this is the same structure that we defined here. There are also other methods that you have to define for a fully functioning linked list. For example, the ability to insert something in the middle or delete something from the linked list. But essentially, this is the general concept is the same. Okay, so could we just implement this idea with lists? The answer is yes. You can exactly do that by having lists inside of lists, which each one of them contains 2 items. But why do we do this? So you have a container, you have a name for it, and some kind of data for it. You can implement that using a list, but why do we go through the trouble here to do all this implementations or to this definitions, a lot of functions? So we kind of touched on that in DSCI 511. That's to make our code more structured and more understandable for us humans. Because at the end of the day, all of this is gonna be translated to machine code. And in case you don't have any efficiency problems, it doesn't matter how you implemented it. But these days, the developer's time is much more expensive than the computation time. And we want to maintain our code. So if I go back to this code sometime in the future, and if I have implemented it in this way, I look at this object and say, okay, treasure box. This is a particular type of object. This has append outer, append inner. I kind of immediately know what I'm dealing with because it has an analogy with a concept that I have in my head about treasure boxes, for example. And a list object, for example, is much more versatile to be used for a purpose that we have here. So a list is very general purpose. It can store any kind of object. It can store any kind of data, for example. But in this case, I want a particular application. And okay, so that's why. Let's see what's coming next. Okay. Any questions so far? Before moving on to the next section. All right. Now let's discuss tree structures. So one particular application of recursive algorithms and basically a recursive way of thinking is for when you have data that is organized as a tree. Let's see what a tree is. So suppose that you have data about military ranks, general, colonel, captain, sergeant, private, things like that, and you just, because there's some kind of hierarchy to it, you start from the top and then you branch off as many times as needed. And you can do the same with employees in an organization, with students in a university. So kind of same idea. Okay, now let's go through, learn the terminology that's applied to trees. All right, let's have that on the screen. Okay, so we call each one of these things that you see on the screen, we call each one of them a node, okay? And we call each one of these lines, the line from a node to another node, we call them edges. And there are particular nodes in this tree structure that have particular names. For example, this top one, it doesn't have any nodes above that, so we call that a parent node or root node. We call that a root node. And we have also nodes all the way at the bottom that don't have other children, so we call those leaf nodes. Like in a real tree, you have leaves. And anything in between is just, internal node, okay? And then we also call these how many levels we go down, we call that the height or the depth of the tree. And we use those interchangeably in this course. Okay, so again, here we have the roots, here we have the leaves, internal nodes. Each one of these things is a node, and those connecting lines are called edges. Okay. So, when we say we have a binary tree, it means that at each node can have at most, not at most, exactly 2 children. Okay? So in this case, you can see that this is not a binary tree because some of these nodes have more than 2 children. But in a binary tree, each node has exactly 2 children. And we have looked at tree structures like this in the previous lecture when we discussed the call stack for an exponential function. All right, so let's see how we can implement a binary tree in Python. So now you are, at this point, because we have talked about the linked list or the treasure box object, you're ready to learn what is a binary tree. A binary tree works in almost exactly the same way as a linked list, with the difference that instead of just having just one children or one next object, we have 2 children or 2 next objects. We have a left element and a right element. That's the only difference. Okay. So you can see here that I call the data, in this case, I called it item instead of treasure. Okay. And instead of having self.next, I have self.left and self.right. Okay. So one thing to notice is that each one of these nodes in this particular tree is by itself is also a tree. Okay, so if you have a binary tree, each one of the nodes can also be thought of as a binary tree by itself. And this is why self.left, when we assign data to it, will be a binary tree itself, and self.right will also be a binary tree. It means that all of the operations that I do with any node is also applicable to all other nodes inside that tree. Okay. All right. So let's first see how we can check whether an item exists inside of this binary tree. So we have a method called contains, okay? And it takes in the object itself, and we're looking for a particular item. Okay. So we have a base case here, first of all. It says, okay, look at this particular node that we're working on. Does this contain the item that you're looking for? If yes, just return true. That's the item we're looking for. Okay. But if you start from the top, that's usually not the case, so you have to go down the ladder in order to find that item. Okay. So it says, okay, now, if this is not the case, we move on here. We have 2 cases, if self.left, if self.right. So we have to check both sides. Okay. So we say that is self.left none? So if that's none, then we don't care about this line. Okay. We check out the other lines. But if it contains something, then it says run this function recursively again. Okay, let's see what this means. Let's start here. Okay, and let's say that here we have 5, here we have 100, we have -5, 2, 0, 14. And suppose that I want to look for item -5. Okay, so this is what I'm searching for. All right, according to this algorithm, I start from here. Okay, I'm asking the question, is self.item for this particular node equates the data? Okay, so I say, is this what you're looking for? No. Okay, so we just ignore that block. Now, we have 2 children. All right. We say that if self.left is not none, so in this case self.left exists, so we can go into that block, and we say that whatever you did here, do exactly the same thing here, right? So what did I do here? I said, is self.item the thing that you're looking for? So okay, do the same thing here. Is self.item the thing that you're looking for? No. So again, We do that recursively. Is self.item the thing that you're looking for? Yes, so return true. Okay. And suppose that this wasn't here, and suppose that this is just -3, and we had something like this. Again, let's say 80 and -5 here. So, okay, self.item here, is that the one? Is this the one? Is this the one? No. So we go ahead and check, we return false through all of these, and then we go check out the right-hand side. Is this the item you're looking for? No. Check the left-hand side. Is this the item that you're looking for? No. Okay. Come back here. Check out this side. Is this the item that you're looking for? Check the left-hand side. Is this the one? No. Check out the right side. Is this the item that you're looking for? Yes. So you see that the set of instructions that I follow is exactly the same for each node. Each node has self.item, so I can ask the same question over and over again. This is basically how the contains method work, and all other methods for a tree-like structure. Okay. And if I execute all these blocks of code and I still didn't encounter that item that I was looking for, it means that that item does not exist in the tree, so just return false. Okay. Now let's quickly check out the insert method as well, and after that we're going to take a break. Okay, so with insert, again, it's kind of the same kind of thing. We want to take an item and insert it inside of the tree structure. Okay, we pick a random side to insert that element because this particular tree structure is not sorted or anything. So I just pick randomly in order to not overpopulate one side. I'll go back to that. I'll come back to this later. Okay, pick one side. If we picked left, if that left-hand side is none, okay, put the item right there. Okay, so it means that if I have, if I'm at this node and I want to insert 50, for example, okay, and I have picked left. Is there something here? No. So put 50 here. Okay. Okay. If there was something here, I would have gone to the right-hand side. Okay. But if this left-hand side is not none, meaning that, for example, we are here, so there is already an item over here, I cannot insert that item here. So it says, in that case, run that set of instructions recursively. Okay. For example, I start from here. I want to insert 50. Okay. I say, pick the left-hand side. Is there anything here? Yes. So I can't insert here. Recursively, go to the right-hand side, for example. Is there anything here to the right-hand side? No. So put the 50 here. Okay. So this is the way that we run these recursive functions for a recursive data structure. Any questions about the set of functions that we have here, about the kind of the process that we go through? So you can see that instead of for each of these situations, instead of having a while loop or something like that, saying that, okay, take this level, do a while loop, look at these items, check stuff, and having a really, really ugly code, we can do it in very simple terms, in terms of recursive functions. We have a set of instructions. We have a same kind of objects at each node. So just apply that over and over again until you hit the base case. Yes? Sorry, you... Oh. Okay. Okay, so in case it's unordered, let's see. So it depends on how many elements you have, obviously, already in the tree, right? Okay, if you pick one side or the other one, and you have a binary tree, if it's unordered, it will be, I guess it will be O of n in that case, that order, because there is no kind of going left or right based on some kind of value. So there is no notion of splitting or anything. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, again, that's a constant factor, so we can ignore that, right? Mhm. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so let's take the break then for a few minutes, and then we're going to be back. Okay, we're back. So we have now defined our binary tree structure, binary tree data structure, and then let's take a look at one example here. So here I'm initializing the binary tree, and it contains this general string here, which corresponds to this tree, kind of. And then we recursively insert items. So kernel A, kernel B, captain A, captain B. And then we just want to test whether an element exists inside of that tree. So clown obviously doesn't exist there, but captain B does. And you can see if you check out the type of the tree itself, the parent node, that's a binary tree, as you can see over here. And if you check out the left element or the right element or anything inside of that, again, all of those are also binary trees because it's a recursive data structure. All right. Now, it becomes more interesting when we actually take advantage of this tree structure to make our algorithms more efficient. So if we have the same binary tree, but we have a condition that each item, all of the items to the right-hand side of the parent node here are greater than the parent node, and all items to the left-hand side of the parent node are smaller than that, then we will call this a binary search tree. Because in that case, we now have some information about the kind of values that are stored there, and it makes it look like a lot like something conceptually similar to like the binary search algorithm in terms of efficiency. Because now it's sorted. When you, for example, when you're looking for 10 over here, if this is a binary search tree, you know that you have to go right. So you discard half of the tree, basically. And it makes it super efficient. And in that case, what's your guess for the time complexity? Log n, right? However, there's one condition. If you want to use a binary search tree, the values, the data that you store in that tree, you have to be able to compare them. For example, you can compare strings. So this particular data, this string data, can be stored in a binary search tree. Numbers obviously can be stored in a binary search tree. Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to show you the process of adding nodes to a binary search tree. So previously, we just picked left or right randomly, but in this case, we do it based on the value. Okay, so give me one value between 0 and 100. Okay, you're, feeling a bit malicious today. Okay, I'm not going to listen to you. Okay, I'm going to write 51 here. Okay, now, please be nice and give me... Okay, other values. So, now, I was just joking. So, any value that you like. 6. Okay, 6 is smaller than 51. So, we go to the left. Another value. Sorry? 29. Okay, 29 is smaller than 51, but, okay, we go down here. Okay, 29 is larger than 6, so we go, okay, we have that. Another value? 22. Okay, 51, 6, 22. Okay, 22 is smaller than 29. Something like that. Okay. 17. Okay, 17. I'm not going to do this kind of thing again in the lecture. Okay. Yeah, your minds are kind of contaminated with the worst case scenarios. Okay, this is the worst case, actually. So if you're so willing to see this here, okay, I'll discuss that first. If you have a binary search tree like this, it inserts everything kind of linearly. And if you search for an element like 22, 29, or whatever, you have 1,000 elements, then what would be the time complexity here? All of them, because you have to search through everything here, because people are not nice enough to give me a nice tree structure. Yeah. Exactly. So there are more sophisticated algorithms out there that actually guard against a situation like this that we have in the class. So each time that the tree grows larger on one side, for example, as soon as we are here, then we kind of know, okay, this is not going too well. So it restructures the tree so that it's nicely balanced on both sides. And we call those trees, like we have AVL trees, something called that. And it's basically an algorithm for balancing search trees. And in your database course, we will talk about these kinds of trees for making searching through a database efficient. And in that case, I will show you in 513 that when you check the kind of operation that is being done on the database, you will actually see it says that binary search tree AVL, for example. It balances itself each time. But in case that we had a nicer data structure that is balanced on each side and we have other elements, obviously in that case, whenever we want to find an item there, we can discard half of the data at each step, and that gives us a log n time complexity. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah, we discussed the time complexity. Again, could we do this with lists and dictionaries? Yes, we could do that. But again, those are like general purpose objects with data structures. It's not really well justified to use those for a binary search tree. Okay, we already have the break. So let's discuss something that you have, I think, already discussed in 571. Have you discussed nearest neighbors? Okay, okay. So nearest neighbors is so you have a data set. Let me just show you visualization. Okay, so you have this data set, X and Y. Okay, and you have a query point here, and you want to find the nearest neighbor in the data set to that query point. Right. Okay, so what do you do in this case to find the nearest neighbor? Right, exactly. So in this case, when you look at this, okay, you say, I'm going to compute the distances between that red point with each one of those blue points, which is the data set, and I'm going to sort that structure and find sort that data and find the minimum, and that will be the nearest neighbor. Or I can choose the first two closest neighbors and say this is a k nearest neighbor algorithm. Okay. All right. So what would be the time complexity for each computation of the nearest neighbor? Of n, right, because I have to compute the distances between this query point and all of the n data points that I have. And the thing is, if you want to be more specific, it can also take into account the number of dimensions that you have. So if this is a one-dimensional data, it's just O of n. If you have multiple dimensions, so k dimensions, then you also have to multiply that by k, so O of nk. Okay, suppose that we don't fix k. In that case, we have to include that in the time complexity. Because for each dimension, you have to repeat the same computation, right? So that would be O of nk. All right. So this is an implementation of this nearest neighbor approach that we have here, and here we use, we use the broadcasting concept that we learned in 511. So basically, I have a query point, and then I reshape it so that I have a column or a column vector, and then what I do is that I subtract the query point from the data and take the square of that, sum everything, and find the minimum argument to find the closest number. The code is not really important here. What's important is that I have to do that computation for n data points and for k dimensions. That's essentially what it comes down to. All right, let's run this and print x. This is the data set. And query point is 0.5.5. Let me see what is the closest point to that one. It says 8, that's the argument. Yeah, that's the index, sorry. And if I check that, yeah, that's pretty close. So 0.41, 0.55, that's pretty close to 0.5 and 0.5. Okay, we have already discussed the time complexity. So the problem with this is that this is going to be actually too slow, right? Each time you want to find the nearest neighbor, You have to do NK computations. And we have learned all about these binary search trees and stuff like that. And we would like to be able to increase the efficiency here. Because we're doing searching. Whenever we're doing searching, we know that we can do something to it, sorting of some sort, to increase the efficiency. And okay, can we do this with binary search tree? Okay, and how do you implement those splitting of those areas with a binary search tree? Can you directly do that with a binary search tree? That's my goal.
We have boundaries on them. So we have, let's say, the left, left locations of n and also the right.
Yeah.
So we can check whether like this dot is located like right.
Okay. Okay, right. That's correct. That's correct. This works if you want to do that checking between the different sides. This works for one dimension. That's the problem. So for one-dimensional data, that's all you see. You just do the split and check things. When we go into 2 dimensions, it's not so obvious what we should do. Okay. So in this case, the answer is that we can actually do something pretty similar to a binary search tree. But instead of doing that only on one dimension, we can actually alternate between different dimensions. So you do the split on one dimension based on just the values on x. Okay, you do the split. When you go to the next level, you do the split on y. You go to the next level, you do the split on x again, do the split on y again, x again, y again, x again, y again, until you reach only one point inside of your leaf nodes. And that particular algorithm is called a KD tree. And you have probably seen this in the arguments of your scikit-learn nearest neighbor something. If you have checked out the document, you should have seen that. So let's discuss KD trees. So a KD tree, the name itself means that a tree that is k-dimensional. Okay. So for example, in this case, we had 2 dimensions, so it would be a 2D tree, but we generally call it a KD tree. All right, let's see how a KD tree works. So we have the code here. It's okay if you don't understand the details of the code right away here in the lecture. You have to spend a bit of time to understand what's going on, but I'm going to describe the general concept here. So let's, here we go. Okay, so first of all, obviously because it's a tree, it's a binary tree, we have a left side and a right-hand side. That's okay, all right? And each side obviously is of the same kind of data structure. Okay, but now I just said that we should alternate between the dimensions. So we do the split on x, and then we do the split on y, and on x and y. So at each level, we kind of have to keep track of which dimension we have split the data on, right? So this should make sense. I have to know if I'm going left or right, what was that based on? Which dimension was that based on? So this is what this self.dim keeps track of. It keeps track of which dimension it is that we split the data on, based on. The data is just the data at each level, just like the binary search tree. Okay, and the location is the location on which I made the split. Okay, so if you remember for the binary search, we looked for the middle index to find the location, and that served as this implicitly as this self.location, and we stored it as MID, M-I-D, right? Here, we can compute the self.location by, for example, the most common way is to compute the median, but that's just basically splitting, yes. The data has to be sorted? No, we do that while we're inserting the data. Okay, Okay, yeah. Sure, yeah, that's a good point. So we're splitting on 2 dimensions here. What if we have more dimensions, something that's quite common in machine learning? You have multidimensional data. So basically, you just follow the same idea. For example, suppose that you have x, y, and z. So in the first level, split on x. Next level, split on y. Next level, split on z. Then go back there. So you cycle through the dimensions. Okay, and it works for those cases too. However, in case you have like 20 dimensions or something, this loses its efficiency advantage because of something that's called curse of dimensionality. You can look that up. The search space becomes sparser and sparser as you have more dimensions. So this kind of gets a little bit messy if I want to explain that here, but you can search the keyword curse of dimensionality, and that affects how efficient these algorithms are. Okay. So let's move on. Now let's see how we can build the tree. So we have figured out that we need a location of the split. We need to keep track of what dimension we split on. Okay, now we're ready to build the tree. So what do we do? Okay, here I'm just computing some variables that I need, number of rows at each level. That's not really important detail. And here self.dim, this line just takes the responsibility of giving us the dimension on which we split. Okay, and this is something like the bucket thing that we've seen in hash tables. It makes sure that we cycle through all of the dimensions. This is basically not important. You can write simpler code to see, okay, take dimension 0 or 1. Okay, not important. Data is just data. Okay, so self.location. I have to compute the median of those, the median of that data along that dimension. I'm going to show you visualizations of all of these operations. So that's coming next. Don't worry about that. Okay, we figured out the location. Now I'm going to sort the data. That's where the sorting happens. Yeah. All right, so I say left subtree is by itself a KD tree. So recursively do this building operation with that data, with that split data. Okay, so we take the right half, we take the left half, do this building thing on both sides. Okay, we do this with the left side hand tree, we do that with the right hand side tree. Okay, and at each level, you can see that I am splitting the data based on this median point. Okay, yeah. Pardon me, before building the entire tree? Oh. Okay, so this is because here, if I don't sort, I cannot write this line of code. So take everything up to that particular value, and then take everything from that particular value all the way to the end, along that dimension. It has to be sorted for that to work. So it's exactly like the thing that we did with the middle index. Take everything up to the middle index for the left, take everything from the middle index all the way to the end for the right half. Okay, so this is basically the way that we build the tree. So when we want to insert the data, instead of having a one-dimensional data and looking at the values, we check the data at every level and then insert those values. Okay, I'm not going to discuss this part of the algorithm yet. So let me just run this code and show you a few visualizations. Okay, so this is the two-dimensional data that we have, all right? And here I have, this is the first level. I have found the median point, okay? And because we have an even number of points, the median is somewhere in between those points. Okay, so that's the first split. Now let's do another split. Depth 2. Okay, now we alternate. That was along X. Now I do splits on Y. And because I had 2 splits, now I have 4 total sections. Okay, let's do that again. Okay, another set of splits. So X, Y, and then X again. Depth 4. Okay, again, narrowing down, and then do this, and that's the final level because we had 20 data points, and if you take the log of 20, that would be 2 to the power of 4, between 4 to 5. And yeah, 5 is where you get down to the leaf nodes, and each leaf node contains only one data point. Okay, let's now take a look at the approximate nearest neighbor here. Okay, so the way that we increase the efficiency here is here in these few lines of code. We say that if we are at the leaf node, then return the data. That's what we're looking for. If not, we take the query point and we select the dimension along which we're working on, and then look at the value. Is that smaller than the self.location, because that's where we made the split? Is that smaller? Then only check the left subtree. Is that larger? Then check the right subtree. So you can see that the algorithm, I mean, there are details to it, but overall, it looks very much similar to the binary search tree. Compare the value along a particular dimension, not all of the dimensions, okay? It's because we had that split based on particular alternating dimensions. Look at that dimension, look at that location, check the value. Is that smaller? Check the left subtree. Is that larger? Check the right subtree. And do that recursively until we hit leaf node. So let's run that, and we have already run this algorithm. And let's find the nearest neighbor here. So the nearest neighbor to point 1 and 1, that would be something over here and over here. It finds that as 0.87, 0.89, which is this point, I guess. 0.87. No, 87. That's right. 89. Yeah, that's this point. Okay. And let's check out the values there. Yeah, that's the value. And then for another point, 0.5 and 0.5. So it falls somewhere here, and it finds that closest neighbor to be 0.69, 0.39. Okay, so for a point here where the mouse pointer is, it finds it to be 6931. 31 and 69. It finds it to be this one. Oh no. 0. 31 is the Y, so it should be here, somewhere here. Okay. This doesn't look right because it should give me somewhere something along. Oh, okay, yeah. All right, so yeah. Okay. That's the nearest neighbor. So 0.41, 0.55, 0.41, and 0.55. That's the, but I don't find the nearest neighbor. Anyways, so the idea is that with this algorithm, what happens is that with this implementation, we can't find the exact nearest neighbor because of the way that the algorithm is written. There are more sophisticated algorithms that take care of this point, because when you do the splits on different dimensions, it's not possible with this way of implementation to keep track of the nearest neighbors in the most correct way. Again, there are other methods that take care of this. For example, the scikit-learn one implements that if you use the KD tree option. But basically, this is the idea. So the finding of the nearest neighbor is much faster because we have the splits. Okay. All right. Yeah, I mentioned this point here. It doesn't work perfectly. And let's now check out a few time experiments here. So what I'm doing here is that I check out the searching for the nearest neighbor using scikit-learn, KD tree, and then I do this KD tree query, and then I use brute force to do the same thing. Whenever you see the word brute force, it means that I have to check every element in order to find the answer. That's the meaning of brute force. So instead of doing this sophisticated tree structure, I'm just going to look through everything and find the nearest neighbor. Okay, let's do this. Get that started. Okay, we're done. Now let's check out the results. Have a look there. So what you see here, KD tree init, it is the time for us to build the tree structure, and query time is when we want to look for the closest neighbor. So brute force uses just brute force linear search. The query thing here uses KD tree, and this is the initialization time. Do you think that makes sense, those results? So let's take a look at the brute force. It starts off with 9 all the way at the end, and then we grow n by a factor of 10. It's not exactly 10 because for smaller values of n, this is not very reliable. As we go and try larger values of n, you can see the linear trend. Okay, so at each iteration, for each factor of 10, the running time also go up by a factor of 10. So this one looks okay. Now, let's look at the query time. So what do you think this query time is? Constant. Yeah, you're right. Just based on the results that we can see here. Yeah. That again, these computations are not that reliable because of the things that are going on my system right now. So, but you can kind of see an increasing trend up to this point, kind of, and then it reduces. If you check out larger values, this might resolve itself. But for this algorithm, we have something that looks logarithmic, basically. An increase, a constant increase, a constant value increase in the time that we have. Okay. However, the interesting thing here is that the KD tree initialization itself, it's not linear. You can see that when you go up by a factor of 10, that growth factor is larger than 10. It's like 20 or 30. So it's definitely not linear. It's probably something close to n log n in this case. Okay, so now it's worth asking this question. Is it worth building the KD tree structure, or should we just do the brute force? Because creating the KD tree structure takes a lot of time by itself. Yes, the queries are much faster. Yes, that's true. But initializing the KD tree is very slow. Precisely. It depends on how many queries we want to make. So if you want to just make, let's say, 1 or 2 queries, then that's all you care about. Yes, just do the brute force. Don't create this whole tree structure. But if you're gonna make 1 million queries to this data set, then obviously pay the price for building the KD tree, and then just query it in much smaller, shorter time. Okay, so it brings us back to the concept of amortization. I kind of showed you the answer, but let's focus on this value, 10,000, and k equals 10. So the KD tree initialization takes about 4 milliseconds, and the query time takes about 0.1 millisecond. The brute force search takes 1 millisecond. So how many queries do we need to do such that the KD tree is worth building? I kind of showed you the answer, but anyways, the reasoning is more important. It takes 5 queries for that to make sense, because if we do 5 queries, then we have to initialize the tree 4 milliseconds, and 5 of 0.1, that would be 0.5. So 4.5, that would be the total time we spent. And with brute force, we are already spending 5 milliseconds. So even for N5 in this case, it's worth building the tree and then doing the queries. Okay, so this is a recurring theme. We have discussed this before. So we pay some upfront cost in order to save time later. And we have seen that in the previous lectures with the idea of pre-sorting a list so that we can do the searches faster. This is the same idea. Right? Okay, so if you remember when we discussed the idea of a hash table, I said that every once in a while we have to grow the size of the hash table in order to not have collisions in the hash table, right? So when we grow the size of the hash table, we essentially have to copy the data over to other places. right? And if you have n data points in there, we have to do O n time operations in order to copy those things. And you remember that we said that the insertion time for a hash table is constant, right? Because we just generate a hash and then put the data in that particular buckets. But we have to do this O of n time operation every once in a while. But why do we say that it's still O of 1? Why is it constant? Because you do that O of n time operation, you do that copying thing only very rarely. Okay, so for every n insertions, okay, suppose that, yeah, you have O of n copy time, and you do that only for n insertions. So you divide that by n, and that gives what we call amortized constant time. Okay, so it's not exactly constant time, but because we spread the cost of that copying over several operations, this still works out to be constant time. So the same kind of thing happens here. If we have something like O of n log n operations to build the KD tree, then the querying time takes O log n, something close to that. Okay. However, this cost of building the tree is actually spread out among several queries. So if you make n queries, then this is divided by that, and then we will have O of 2 log n, and then we will have amortized O log n all the way in the end. So this is the initial cost, the upfront cost, but we divide that by the total number of data points, total number of queries, and if that total number of queries is on the order of the data points itself, then this will be distributed, and this will be still O log n. Okay. Any questions about basically everything we covered in this section? Yeah. Okay. This one? Yeah. This is, yeah. So, any last thoughts? One last thing to say here is that the tests that I have done here is using the scikit-learn KD tree, and that has a smaller time complexity compared to the algorithm that we implemented. So if I show you our implementation here, okay, this is where we build the tree structure. So let's see. I'm doing these kinds of operations. These are constant in time. This NP median, I'm not sure what Python does under the hood. Maybe n log n. I'm not sure. Let's say it's n. Let's say it's O n log n. Okay. And then we have this thing, arc sort. And because this is kind of a sorting algorithm, we are sure that this should take at least O n log n. Okay. And now we have these copy operations, and for each level we have to do, so in total we have to do O of n operation to do the copying, but it doesn't matter because compared to O of n log n, this is still just smaller, so we don't care about that. However, one thing to note is that I do this O n log n operation how many times? How many levels do I have? Log n levels, right? Because I'm doing the splitting. So this actually, the entirety of this build function will be this multiplied by log n itself, and we can say that this whole thing here with this implementation will be something like this, log 2n. So O log raised to the power of 2n. And this implementation is obviously slower than what scikit-learn has implemented because of the details that we have here. We didn't want to make the code super complex. But in scikit-learn, they implement this using other algorithms which makes this faster, makes this close to n log n. So that's one other detail that I wanted to share with you. Okay, so yeah, that's it for this lecture, and I'll see you in the lab today. Okay, thank you.